afternoon, everybody. Is there an echo? Welcome to this meeting of the Premier and Constitutional Oversight. It's a Friday afternoon. We don't have air conditioning, so I think let's take the opportunity to be quite crisp in our deliberations. Don't think anybody wants to particularly linger. So I just want to welcome everybody. We can introduce ourselves in a minute. I just want to check with the procedural officer if we have received any apologies. And Premier. Okay, so it's the Premier, the DG, and Anita Vosloo have sent apologies. Have we heard anything from the committee members?
And Pat Lecker.
Okay, and Member Pat Lecker also sent her apologies. And we have the Acting DG, Henriette Robson. So yes, we can all just introduce ourselves. I'll start, we can just move round. We all know who everyone is. I'm Benedicta van Minnen, the chair of the committee.
Thomas Walters, a member of the committee.
Leon van Wyk, member of the committee. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Chairperson. Khalid Sayed, member of the committee.
Good afternoon, Wendy Kaiser-Philander, committee member.
Good afternoon, Brett Heron, member of the committee.
So, Chairperson, good afternoon, Chairperson and members. Henriette Robson, I am the acting DG at this point in time, and the rest will introduce themselves.
Lionel van der Steef, Department of the Premier Legal Services. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ritson van Rensburg, attached to Corporate Assurance Branch.
Good afternoon, I'm Driekus Basson, I'm the CFO.
Good afternoon, Robert Shaw, Officer of the DG.
Good afternoon, Nozipo Mawulwana, Officer of the DG.
Good afternoon, Andre Leroux, Senior Legal Advisor for the Western Cape Provincial Parliament.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody online who needs to introduce themselves? I'm not hearing anyone. Okay, so let us proceed. Member Beatrice, do you want to introduce yourself? Not right now. Okay. Right, we have.
Afternoon.
Yes.
Good afternoon, colleagues.
You want to introduce yourself, member? Okay, the first thing on the agenda is the briefing by the department on the appointment of the Western Cape Children's Commissioner. I just want to make the point that this is a procedural matter. It is about how we go ahead appointing or advertising for the new Children's Commissioner. It is not pertaining to the current Children's Commissioner. That is subject to a separate process. So this is essentially a procedural briefing. It's not about substantive issues as such. So if I could please hand over to the department. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. So we sent through a 50-page slide presentation. I hope you are all ready for that. So, Chair, I am going to do a very short presentation. I think the act that we are going to refer to is very clear on the process that needs to be followed in the appointment of the Children's Commissioner. And just to stipulate that it says that the committee that is responsible for the parliamentary committee responsible for children's matters must do the recruitment of the Children's Commissioner, and that is why it is with this committee. So I'm going to refer to the Act, and the Act is the Western Cape Commissioner for Children's Act, which is Act 2 of 2019. So in terms of that specific Act, Section 51A, the position becomes vacant if the term of office expires, and the procedure must then be followed as per the specific legislation. Next slide, please. So, Chair, the next few slides just stipulates the process. I'm going to go on so long. So it states that the standing committee, which are you, which we already said, must deal with this appointment process. And there are 5 steps that you need to do. So firstly, by means of a notice in the media or by notices in the media, in all the official languages of the province, you must call for nominations by the public of suitable people or persons to fill the position of the commissioner. Then you must publish in the media a list of the names of all nominations received, again in the official languages of the province, calling for objections from members of the public to any of the nominations made. Then you must consider all the nominations and objectives received, and from there prepare a short list of candidates. And then, of course, invite every shortlisted person for an interview. You must then forward copies of the nominations as well as objectives received to the Premier himself and table your recommendation for the appointment of a commissioner in Provincial Parliament for adoption. Section 2.3, next slide please, then states that if the Provincial Parliament adopts the recommendation of this committee, the Provincial Parliament must submit a recommendation to the Premier. And Section 2.4 states that the Premier must, within 20 days of receiving this recommendation, as well as the nominations and objectives provided by the committee, either appoint a person as recommended by the Provincial Parliament or refer the matter back to Parliament for a reconsideration, as well as, of course, then providing the reasons for that. So, Chair, just in terms of the appointment process, a commissioner is appointed for a period of 5 years, which is renewable once. And of course, you probably would have received notice that the current Children's Commissioner is not going to take up a second term. Then in terms of the qualification, which is also set out in the Act, in terms of Section 3, the Commissioner must be a South African citizen, must be a fit and proper person, and must have proven specialized knowledge of or relevant professional experience or an academic record in public policy, human rights, or issues affecting children. On the next slide, the Commissioner may not, after assumption of duties as a Commissioner, be a member, either in the National Parliament, Provincial Legislature, or a Municipal Council, may not be a member of a national, provincial, or municipal public entity or statutory body, may not be in the service of any organ of state, may not hold any office in a political party, and also may not hold any office that cause a conflict in the role. Thirdly, a person may not be nominated or appointed as a commissioner if he or she has or had been convicted of any offence relating to dishonesty or violence, a sexual offence as defined in the criminal law, is unsuitable to work with children as contemplated in the Children's Act, and is an unrehabilitated insolvent. And Chair, that is short and sweet what the requirements are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to call for questions. I've just got one question. They cannot be a member of the Parliament, the Ledge, the municipality. Does that apply to nominees as well, who could then take the opportunity to resign from that position?
It is a no. It is after appointment, so they will get an opportunity to resign.
Thank you very much. Right, do we have any questions on the process? Member Councillor Philander?
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, I am quite satisfied with what was presented this afternoon. There's nothing outside of what the Act prescribes or regulates us as the committee to do. My only question for clarity is in terms of 2.2a. Is the committee also tasked this afternoon to activate the process? If you can perhaps just give us some clarity in that regard. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Check for us what is 2.2a and whether the committee can activate. Section 2.2a of the Act.
Yeah. If I could just add from my side, it has been referred to us by the Speaker, so we can go ahead then.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So if I'm to understand, just to latch onto that, so today we're in a position to then, as a committee, take a resolution to proceed to advertise for the Children's Commissioner. Okay, all right.
Thank you, Chair. That answers my question. Thank you.
Right, and we come to Member Walters.
Chair, so presumably what we need to do as a committee is move that we proceed with the process of advertising, and so I would like to then volunteer to move that the committee proceeds with the process of advertising and filling the vacancy for the Children's Commissioner.
Thank you very much. Just want to come to Member Said.
Chair, thank you very much. I want to support Member Walters there to say that let's move on with the process. But I want to also, and maybe it's not necessarily for the, because you did say there is a process matter, so maybe not necessarily to discuss with these officials, but to see maybe we can call the HOD and the Premier in just for I think it's important that as we enter the process, the committee also has a reflection on the term of office that was there of the previous commissioner, because that most certainly, it may not technically inform the process, but it will most certainly inform, I can speak for myself, it will inform some of us in terms of how we analyze the applicants that do come through, and also what kind of advice we give to the office of the Premier in terms of how to handle the new person who comes in and how to support that new person. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I think that is a very solid suggestion. Any other questions or anything at this point? Can we then move forward and adopt the motion as moved by Member Walters? Agreed. Right. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much. And yes, as for my commitment to Friday afternoons being efficient, we will have a short meeting. Thank you very much. I think you can be excused. Yes, you too. Okay, then, should we do the resolution now? Should we do the resolution at the end? Okay. Let's then do the second item, and then we can move the motion onto the resolution, which we can then do at the end of the meeting. I don't think we're going to be here very long. Mr. LaRue, have you got anything that you wish to add or bring to our attention on this?
Chairperson, I'm not. I am here if the committee has any questions.
Okay, great. Volunteering for questions then. Thanks. Okay, so that deals with that matter. Then the discussion on the way forward on the Western Cape Amendment Bill, the determination of a number of seats of members. So at the previous committee's final meeting in November 2023, the decision was made to amend the bill, increasing the number of elected members in the Western Cape Parliament from 42 to 48, adding 6 new seats. Obviously, at the end of that term, everything fell away. That bill has now been revived and is before us today, where we must decide if we are going to uphold the decision as made in November 2023, or if we want to amend or change it in any way. So I think everybody is pretty much up to speed on the matter. Can I open the matter for discussions or resolutions or comments? Thank you. I've got Member Heron.
Chair, I'm just not sure that everyone is up to speed on the matter, because I don't feel like I'm up to speed. Unless I know that we received some correspondence with figures and stuff, but they've never been formally presented here. We asked for research on what the cost implications would be for both the human resource expenses and the infrastructure. And I think we did receive an email with some numbers, but do we consider those formally tabled now in front of this committee?
Okay, Member Said.
Chair, now also based on Member Heron's clarity, I think I remember it's quite asking even questions of clarity. One was around what are the legal issues around it being implemented this term, next term. There was that I still remember, and we haven't necessarily, I would have thought that perhaps to lay a basis for the discussion, maybe we could have had a presentation that's informed by the kind of clarity questions that we sought. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions at this point? Should I just ask Mr. LaRue? I think Mr. LaRue did present us with some figures at a previous meeting.
Yes.
You want to maybe just speak to the matter?
Chair, I can't speak to the issues of the cost implications and those sort of financial matters. I assume that has been communicated to the administration. I can't comment on that. I'm not quite sure as far as the legal issues are concerned. I think the committee has been briefed on that. If there's a question, if this committee decides to proceed with the bill and there's a question for some sort of a project plan or timeline so that the committee can appreciate what are the sort of the required timelines to deal with to process the bill, then that can be provided. I haven't yet received a clear indication that it is the committee's intention to proceed. The committee would like a timeline so that the committee can work according to that. And then in such a project timeline, we can indicate to the committee what our estimates are in terms of the legislative process, which is, of course, mostly in the committee's remit for the committee to decide how long that's going to take. What our estimates are as far as the Constitutional Court process is concerned. But then we can get a indication of we would like the bill to be passed by this particular date, and then we would expect that hopefully the Constitutional Court matter would be concluded by this particular date, and then we can have that sort of details. I have provided in the previous term numerous project plans and timelines, so it's not a difficult thing to do, and if there's a request to do that, then we can do that.
I think that would actually be extremely useful, particularly the timeline, that we can have an idea of exactly the kind of time periods one can expect to have happen. I do understand that very often those timelines do tend to slip in reality, but it's always useful to have a guide going forward in that regard. I know we have discussed this matter several times, and we have had at least one presentation, and I know that those questions were then followed up. Let's just determine exactly what clarity people feel they need to have at this particular point that they don't have. Member Kaiser Philander?
Chair, thank you very much. And I'm glad that the advocate is present in the meeting this afternoon. If my memory serves me correct, there was an indication given in terms of the amount of seats increased and what the estimated cost implication would be, if I stand to be corrected. So my question, Chair, is also in terms, based on the information that was provided to the committee at the time, does that indeed, or I would think that puts the committee in a position to be able to determine on the amount of seat based on the information that we have already received. And I do agree in terms of the timeline. Should we then not in principle make that decision as a committee, and then in terms of the timeline, request the further information based on the amount that the committee decide on? That at least gives us a base and a way forward where we're moving to in terms of how many seats to be increased.
Thank you. That is suggesting a way forward. I've got Member Said, and then I've got Member Heron.
Chair, yeah, I mean, again, the issue of the cost implication, the amount of seats exactly, because I remember there was a discussion on that and we wanted clarity, and then also the timeline. So I'm also of the view, I mean, not that one wants to drag out the process, but that we need to at least be furnished and know where we are to some of these questions before we can work on the way forward. Thank you.
Member Heron?
Thanks, Chair. Look, I mean, I stand to be corrected. I did miss a meeting, but I don't think this item was on the agenda for that meeting that I missed. But we received a presentation after the speaker or someone referred the bill back to us. And we received a presentation, and it did contain financial information, but it was outdated. And I recall the committee resolved that we needed updated financial information on the various permutations of seats. And there were some legal questions. I can't remember all the details, but I don't think that those have ever come back to this committee formally. We did receive an email with numbers on it, but I think that the committee must receive that information in a formal way in a committee meeting and then resolve on the way forward, not have that one presentation. I was expecting a presentation today on the questions that arose at the first time we dealt with this. So, I mean, I didn't bring the email with those numbers and stuff. So it feels like we need to close this loop properly before we resolve on the way forward.
Okay, look, I think that's certainly a fair question. I think it probably is. I know there were emails that were sent back, but I don't think it's unreasonable. Mr. Leroux, I'd like your opinion on this, to have a formal sort of final presentation before we then take that decision. Would you please go ahead?
Chair, yes, there seems to be a number of matters in terms of which the committee needs to be briefed. I remember in the presentation I did I can't even remember when that was, late last year, and there were financial implications, but if I remember correctly, the committee members suggested that, listen, this is dated information and we need to kind of redo that exercise. So I think that was the request that be done. Chair, maybe I can also, from my perspective in terms of timelines, I think the committee needs to have a conversation at some point about public involvement, and because obviously that will have a very significant impact on, from where I'm sitting, my point of departure. Are we starting in a committee process, or do we have to cater for a public involvement process as well? But also, if the committee feels that the committee wants an advice on that question, then the committee can maybe just inform us that the committee wants an advice on that particular issue.
Just as the chair, I do know there was public participation in the previous term, and from how I understand it, the bill has now been revived as it stood at the end of the last term. Please correct me if I'm not encapsulating that correctly. So our decision is, do we proceed with that bill as it was finalized at the time, or do we want to do any changes to it? But the public participation has been done. Member Kaiser Philander? Was that not a question? Okay, sorry, I thought you were waving your hand at me. Okay, so the committee at this point is of the view that what we need to have before we can really make substantive decisions on that would then be a presentation that includes the updated finances. I know there was an email to that effect, but it hasn't been formally tabled. A timeline that would need to be estimated as to what the implementation would be. And then also a couple of legal questions that Member Heron says have remained unanswered. I think we can look at the minutes for that. And then Member Said, you also said about implementation cost-wise regarding it being implemented now or in 2029. And the numbers.
Amount of seats.
Yes, which would obviously be involved with the costs. Member Walters?
Yeah, Chair, okay, so it sounds to me, and maybe we should also get this legal clarity on it, but the way I understand it is it's not a new process. It is a continuation of a process that already happened, right? So I don't pick up any a difficulty with us with proceeding with that process. But given the fact that it's, and I remember I made that point as well, that some of the financials might be outdated, and there's a set of questions that obviously political parties members are entitled to ask. So I would suggest that all of us actually send to you as the chair a set of questions that we would like to have in that presentation. On the one hand, we don't want to delay. On the other hand, we don't also want to just railroad things. So what I would just ask then as a possible step for a future meeting is that the questions, that we don't find out what the questions are on the day, as much as possible, that we have the questions that members want asked, that they have it sent beforehand to you. Obviously doesn't preclude people from thinking of new things that they want to ask in the meeting, but let's then derive value out of that presentation. So I would suggest that that step is worked in, that questions are sent to you.
Okay, I think that's a good suggestion. In terms of that, would it be unreasonable with SOPA happening in a week and a half, would it be unreasonable to say that those questions should be submitted by close of business on Friday, 14 days from now? Would that be an unreasonable time period? Because I think, because that would be, well, I'd rather, that would be what's that date? The 28th of Feb. Member Syed?
Chair, I'm going to say yes. I want to agree with Member Heron. It's generous. I'm going to add overly generous. I think because we have already now, in the inputs we are making, we know what are the questions. I think maybe we can we can submit a bit earlier so that the process also doesn't get stalled.
We can do it in 7 days. We can do it by
think
next
so.
Friday.
Let's do that before we get into the SOPA things.
Before you have an opportunity to spend your time at SOPA thinking of questions. Okay, so then by next Friday, written questions will be submitted. We will then refer it to the department, along with, we'll check the minutes for the last presentation and get an updated presentation at the next meeting. Yes, are you comfortable with that?
Chair, I am. I accept that the request will be made to the secretary so that the secretary can, delegate.
But you're happy with the timeline of next Friday, and then at the next meeting, we can't find the date at this moment, but it's sometime in March. Yeah. Okay. All right, so that matter will then stand over to then. And I think we're getting through this actually remarkably quickly now. Okay, so then we will have that presentation and then make the decision going forward. Then we need to look at the consideration and adoption of the draft committee meeting minutes of the 28th of November. Has everybody received them and comprehensively perused them? Okay. Would somebody like to propose them or make any corrections? Member?
I propose that we adopt, Chair.
Thank you very much. Have we got a seconder?
I'm happy to second.
Thank you very much. So that is those minutes. Is there anything arising out of those minutes anybody wants to talk to? No. Okay. Then resolutions. So here I have, keep losing my bits of paper here. Give me a second. Okay, this is the resolution that was made in August 2019 regarding the advertising. I just want to read it to see if people want to accept this or propose a different wording. The committee resolved that the notice in the media calling for nominations for the appointment of the Commissioner for Children should be advertised for 14 days in 3 official languages of the Western Cape, in community newspapers and 3 mainstream and 1 national newspaper. The newspapers identified to be utilized for the advertisements provincially should be the Burger to place the advert in Afrikaans, City Vision in Xhosa and the Cape Times for English. The advert should also be placed in community newspapers in all Western Cape districts to cover the rural areas. The advert should be sent to the institutions of higher learning and non-governmental organizations and local municipalities in the province. All means available should be utilized to publicize the call for nominations, including social media, and committee members to take the advert to their constituency offices. Would that be acceptable wording, or are there proposals? Member?
I'm just wondering, Chair, given the changes that we've seen since 2019 in terms of the media and the media publications that may or may not be around anymore, and the reach that old print media used to have that they may not have anymore, whether there's an alternate form of an addition in terms of advertising for the Post.
I think that's a very good point. Any other? Member Walters?
Chair, it might not be applicable in this particular instance, but certainly with the Language Committee and the Cultural Commission, what we did in my committee was also make sure that it's on the Parliament's own social media channels. It sounds obvious, but I didn't hear it in that resolution. So I think it maybe just have a note along the points made around social media, making full use of the Provincial Parliament's social media channels.
Okay, I can put in social media channels. Should I take out the suggestions of which newspapers, rather to say it will be advertised in Afrikaans, Xhosa, and English? Okay, all right. Okay, so the procedure officer says we have to determine which newspapers. I think the Burger, we know the Burger is going, we know the Cape Times. I don't know if City Vision is still.
Chair, I think that is what Member Van Wyk mentioned in terms of the procedure of determining the reach of the various newspapers. But in principle, we say Afrikaans, English, and Xhosa newspapers.
All right. So the procedure officer can then determine which ones would be. We have, because we're going to need to check that they are still going. Okay. Okay. Should we then resolve? I don't think I need to read it again then. I think just those alterations that we've made, and we then so resolve. Okay, thank you. Then do we need to do a resolution about the presentation for the seats bill? Or we have agreed that it will happen at the next meeting? Are there any other resolutions anybody wants to raise? Yes, Member Syed.
Okay, as I suggested while the officials are present, perhaps just as we get into the process, obviously we're going to now go, it's going to be advertised, but possibly before we, maybe a session just before we look at the CVs and do the shortlisting, that reflection session.
Okay, I think that it's also, I think maybe what one should do is look at a workshop of exactly how the process would work with the interviews, and as part of that, do a reflection session on what has been learned. Member Walters?
Chair, when you use the term workshop session, because if I follow Member Said's logic, you want to have a grasp of what the individual is supposed to be doing, what constraints they're facing, and making sure that when you go into the selection process, you know what to look for. I think it might be, and it's presumably in your hands as the chair, but to maybe have a workshop a session where we actually brainstorm exactly that. It might be might be an idea to do it in a workshop format, not even necessarily in a formal committee meeting. I would leave that part up to you, but I think that's a very good suggestion.
As the procedural officer has pointed out, our timeline ends in May 2025. So let's work around that. I know we have quite a busy period coming up, and I think it's Ramadan as well in March. So there are constraints, but let us see how quickly we can put together a workshop so that we can then have that session, bring in the issue of the reflection, and then obviously seeing what we've learned from the last 5 years. Remember?
Chair, thank you. No, I agree with the proposal. Let's move on that. I think just on the issue of the publications, perhaps we can also say that if members have got suggestions of publications in line with what was said, we can then just deposit that to the procedural officer. So let's say we're thinking of a publication, even if it's an online one or whatever that's going to be relevant, then we just deposit the name as a suggestion.
I think that's a good idea. I think one wants to maximize sort of whatever publicity one can in that regard. Okay, we haven't got a date right now, but we will come back with a date and we'll lever it in as soon as we practically can so that is then done. May seems like a long way away right now, but it's literally around the corner. And then I think that is it. Is there anything else anybody wants to raise? You're standing between yourselves and your weekend. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it. And the meeting is adjourned. There are